Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Conflict Counselor podcast with yours truly, Chris Capocha, attorney mediator at the 47th District Court in Michigan. We're celebrating a little milestone today with this, our 25th episode. For the past year or so, it has been my privilege to help you avoid disputes and navigate conflict by sharing the lessons I've learned in mediating hundreds of court cases. On the occasion of our 25th episode, it feels appropriate to defer to a master mediator, no less than our beloved 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. We all know about Lincoln's prowess in shepherding the country through the Civil War. We may not be aware, however, that before the war, before his presidency, indeed before his public life, Lincoln was in the business of resolving everyday disputes between common folk. As a country lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, Lincoln brought over 1,000 cases to resolution without going to trial. And he did so by advocating and following some key lessons, 3 of which I'd like to share with you today. The first lesson, directed at lawyers, really makes sense for everyone. Compromise to avoid lawsuits. Or, as Lincoln said, quote, discourage litigation, persuade your neighbors to compromise whenever you can. Point out to them how the nominal winner is often a real loser in fees, expenses, and waste of time. End quote. This is a lesson of considerable value and one that I try to share with litigants and those contemplating a lawsuit. It is often the case that parties in conflict will hold out for a complete victory, but fail to consider the costs involved, not only of time and money, as Lincoln reminds us, but the costs of mental and physical stress and fractured relationships. The second Lincoln lesson, refrain from contentious language and actions. In Lincoln's words, quote, quarrel not at all. No man resolved to make the most of himself can spare time for personal contention. Still less can he afford to take all the consequences, including the vitiating of his temper and loss of self-control. End quote. Words and actions, what we say and what we do, often provoke conflict. I see this every day at the courthouse where these personal and business conflicts have turned into lawsuits. Not one of us desires conflict in our life. Lincoln is asking us to be mindful of and to avoid contentious behavior in words and deeds, which lead to costly conflicts. Moreover, to the extent we give in to the impulse to argue, fuss, and fight, we abandon our rational, better selves. Finally, the third Lincoln lesson, make friends of your adversaries. As Lincoln rhetorically asked, quote, do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends? End quote. Here, we can't help but think of the biblical admonition to love our enemies. But I don't think Lincoln intended to go quite that far with this lesson. Rather, his point, I believe, is that if we treat those with whom we are conflicted as friends, with the understanding, respect, and kindness that friends deserve, the very sting of the conflict is neutralized. These lessons from Abe Lincoln are, of course, much easier to say than to follow. It is difficult to compromise my position when I feel that I am right and the other person is wrong. And sometimes I just can't refrain from provocative words and actions because, well, he deserves it. And asking me to treat him as my friend? No way. But the message of Lincoln in these lessons is this: avoid these negative knee-jerk reactions to conflict, and the conflict itself dissolves and gives way to reconciliation. This from the man whose skill at conflict resolution saved our nation. As always, thank you for listening to the Conflict Counselor. Feel free to share your thoughts about the podcast and about life in general. In the next episode, we'll discuss a key strategy for dealing with creditors. Be sure to tune in if you or someone you care about is struggling with unpaid debt. See you then.